I don't know. I know I don't know. I know I don't know what I don't know. Now, in a world full of change, especially when it comes to changes happening on the small business side of things within community institutions, within community banks, within credit unions, is not knowing a limitation of future growth, or is this awareness of not knowing the very thing that will unlock exponential growth for financial brands in the age of AI? Well, let's find out together on today's episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
You're listening to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
Welcome back to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm James Robert Lay, founder and CEO of the Digital Growth Institute, where we help financial brands uncover and eliminate their biggest customer journey blind spots so that they stop losing loans and deposits. Before we get into today's episode, I want to invite you to join me in the Digital Growth community so that you can unlock all 12 courses in our Digital Growth University, plus get access to mastermind roundtables that I facilitate, which will expand your network, it'll expand your perspective, and you'll be able to connect and learn together with other growth-minded financial brand marketing and sales leaders. So send me a text right now. My cell phone, it is 832-549-5792. Text me to join the Digital Growth community. And as a listener of this podcast, I'm going to benchmark your website so that you can see how your website performs, how it compares, how it stacks up to other financial brands. Text me, 832-549-5792. Now, joining me for today's conversation is Shane Pierson, Purveyor of Honest Capital. Today, we are going to talk through the continued evolution when it comes to the growth of small business for small businesses in collaboration with community financial brands. Welcome to the show, Shane. It is good to share time with you today, buddy.
Happy to be here, man. Appreciate the time to have a little chat.
Before we get too far into the world and the continuously transforming world of SBA lending, what is good in your world right now, personally or professionally?
Number one, personally, family. So I've got 3 kids and a wife, and they are the priority when it comes to how I think about what my day brings and how it starts and finishes. So I think honestly, they're my reason I'm even in this game and get any fulfillment out of the effort that I put into it. So I think that's going the right way. I've got 3 healthy kids and a wife that loves me, and I'll take that over anything else. I'd leave everything else behind to just keep that maintained. Professionally, it's the opportunities have never been bigger in the world that I live in. Specifically, SBA loans is the niche that it's making more and more noise. It's still a pretty small piece of the pie in the grand scheme of the type of financing that exists out there in the world, but it is having an impact, and I think will continue to grow and have even greater impact, especially post-COVID, with its familiarity and its versatility and really how it can help customers on a variety of ways. It's the reason I've stayed in it for 18 years. So the volume of transactions that I'm able to get my hands on, and the place where I reside now, I think gives me a good platform to really hit all the different angles that a customer needs, whether just starting up a business or trying to explore and expand.
Well, when you're talking about the home front and your 3 kids and your wife, and I think about my 4 kids and my wife, it reminds me of the quote from David McKay. And he said, no failure or no success, for that matter, no success, whatever that success is, can compensate for failure in the home. And
True doctrine right there.
I think it's so easy. And I've struggled with this as an entrepreneur early on, specifically. Gotten a lot better over the last 3, 4, 5 years, but trying to find that balance, that sense of balance, because it's like I would over-index on work, and then I would over-index on the family, and it was this, how do we integrate the two together?
Yeah.
And then you're talking about your 18 years in the SBA world. What has changed over the last 18 years? And because you mentioned that small piece of the pie, but it's growing in importance. What has changed?
I think the biggest change has been the accessibility of the program to a wider array. And so I think the government has actually done a relatively good job at trying to expand the program to get to be able to reach even more than they were when I first started. I mean, the loan amounts max were $2 million in the little program I was in, this SBA 7A program. And the uses were relatively restricted. And so you kind of were carving up to really only be focusing on a particular set of industries. And most of the SBA market, banks and lenders were focusing on like hospitality, gas stations. So really mom and pop spots, but it left a lot of people on the table that really couldn't be easily serviced. There was very few lenders that were aggressively pursuing that. And I think from them expanding the program and the number of banks, especially, let's just carve out from COVID on, the number of banks that had really entered the SBA market, it feels like it's doubled or tripled just as far as the activity level that's put out there. And that has made competition drive banks to maybe ease up a little on their risk assessments to allow different business types to fit.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a world right now that's hyper entrepreneurial. I mean, every time you turn around, and maybe that just is the algorithm talking to me for the one that I follow. But I think the energy behind most of the really hard workers in the industries that they work are gearing towards this entrepreneurial spirit. People looking for freedom, looking for control over their lives, and that's kind of the voice that's screaming to them. So that's a big difference compared to 20 years. There's a lot more work that went into that 18 years ago.
Well, I mean, when we look at the data, I just pulled this up. Entrepreneurs filed 5.2 million quote unquote likely employer business applications between January 2021 and December 2023, which was slightly more than 1/3 increase compared to that number filed between 2017 and 2019. So you're right. There's this, I think, what do you think is driving that growth of just entrepreneurship specifically here in the United States?
I think you've heard it talked about on your show, and you've discussed it, that there is that silver tsunami happening in the market where there's baby boomers who are retiring and people's parents who are exiting the workforce, and youth that are young, their children that are looking at them seeing that, hey, I don't want to retire out that same way. I got to do something different. And I think that whole social shift and the visibility behind all of it is there now on a grander scale because of technology we have available. The internet, and access to information is such a flood that it's pulling people as, hey, this actually is a lot more accessible than I would have ever thought. You tend to hear the horror stories of it a lot more. I remember that being the horror stories of entrepreneurship 18 years ago compared to today is, no, there's ways to solve problems and for things to become more automated so that you can really focus on building your business, not just working in the business, being the shop owner who sits behind the counter every day. So
it makes me think of the work that Cody Sanchez has been doing in regards to making like boring businesses cool. The laundromat, the car wash. But you're right, that silver tsunami, it's becoming more accessible. The internet technology, YouTube, TikTok, for that matter, is increasing in awareness, which begs the question, where are the opportunities on the banking side, even on the credit union side, to continue to create awareness for SBA programs within a community institution to create that visibility?
Where are the opportunities within the banking to create the awareness? I think, in all honesty, it needs to live in the mind of every salesperson that is out there in the market catering to customers, because we're seeing those opportunities. We're seeing those opportunities come to the forefront in really diverse industries that never really existed up until the last 5 years, and especially in like e-commerce and everything else. And so it's trying to understand the revenue models of the customers that come to them, and use that in the way that they portray and actually share that opportunity with the market, kind of create a competitive marketplace with the people that you're working with, networking with the business owners, and even can create a little micro marketplace with those guys to be able to share services and even be able to acquire or sell businesses to one another. I think by having those relationships with those different partners, people that you've serviced, or that like even the local markets that you're working in, you kind of become this connector that allows you to help bring those to the surface, because a lot of the times these small business owners are so stuck just working in their business. As much as there's opportunities to step out of it, their mindset is, I need to go sell, I need to go, dig in and be the guy with a shovel in my hand. you can be kind of a voice of reason, and from I think an unbiased third party perspective too as well.
Yeah.
But they'll listen to you, and they'll go for those connections if you see opportunity.
Well, there's something that I've been thinking about. Connections lead to conversations. Conversations lead to content co-creation opportunities. Content co-creation is the foundation for facilitating community. And through the community, that's where the path towards future conversion will come from. And it's making micro deposits into the trust fund of the market, of the community over time that will eventually sprout and bear fruit. What is a potential roadblock or an obstacle? Because you're talking about this from a sales perspective. I'm looking at this from a marketing perspective. And together we can look at this marketing and sales, which is just growth for that matter. But what prevents, whether it be a lender or their team or their organization, from unlocking and capturing some of this potential here?
Honestly, I think you and I have talked about this in the past. I use the term dinosaurs a little bit too frivolously when discussing what things prevent growth in the places that I've worked before. It's more of a mentality than it is an individual, and it's you get stuck in the habits of the past and the things you've been taught, a little overconfident in the knowledge that you've obtained and even the wisdom you've obtained to think that it's always going to be relevant. And so the ways that small business owners are looked at, the way that you analyze your processes and how you advance internally to from underwriting to closing to even selling, all of those things have opportunities to be done differently, more efficiently, and could directly contrast what you've been taught was the only way or the right way to do things historically. So I feel like that tendency to lean towards it kind of fossilizes your mind, and you can say I have 30 years of experience in SBA, and when I hear that I kind of cringe a little. Even saying I have 18 years, I'm like, what am I got to make sure I'm constantly chiseling away at myself, not letting the callus build up that would stop me from adopting new technology like AI and some of these other processes like loan operating systems, things out there that are being built, and ways that you can implement and change how you do things to be more efficient for the customer, number one, but also to ensure you're satisfying all the risk assessment that's needed.
I mean, what's your take on go to market? Because once again, I think, and from my perspective, I'm seeing this movement more on the SBA side, on the commercial side, maybe even on the mortgage side, that the individual brand of a lender has the potential to be as influential, if not even more influential than the corporate brand of the institution, which is, it's still very threatening. I don't think we can stop that wave. That wave will continue to grow within the next 3 to 5 years, particularly as we're moving further and further into not just the age of AI, but even the creator economy for that matter. So developing new skills, developing new capabilities that allow for the connections that lead to conversations, to co-create content, to facilitate the community that leads to a path towards conversion. Where's your take on this with that idea of the individual brand being that influential within the buying journey, more so than even just the corporate brand of an institution?
Well, I've suffered from being limited by places in the past that I've worked, just meaning what resources are accessible. So in sales, for me, it's like what you end up having to sell, especially within a commoditized market. I think that's something important to realize that when you don't have something that's so specialized that only you can do it, it puts you in a position where you have to kind of figure out who you are and how best to present that commodity to the person you're working with. So for a sales guy like myself, you're the first intake, you're the first voice, you're the first person they see on the other end of the camera or in person. And if you don't have that established and you don't have a way that you want to methodically present yourself and consistently present yourself, you end up inevitably limiting your progression and the progress of yourself and also the person that you work for. So I think the more dynamic that you make your service, the more it allows for that to become an even stronger play. The way I mean it, like a bank's brand or a lender's brand is the most important, especially when it becomes a more single use type situation. Like I need to churn and burn working capital for somebody. And so speed is going to be the number one thing that sells because your rates are secondary for that particular ask in the market. Now you get into something more dynamic, business acquisitions being a big part of it, something that requires a lot of moving parts and a lot of human touch that still has probably years of automation build outs before it can really be entirely automated. That requires a knowledge base, but not just a knowledge base of the how-tos of how to do a loan or what the rules are, but how to navigate people's emotions. Because good heavens, that's the number one thing that kills a deal. The number one thing that progresses a loan is really understanding your customer's motivation level and their personality and how they're going to approach a problem if it comes up and how to set the pathway to kind of overcome that. And so if you're putting yourself out there and building teams of people, even we'll call them competitors in the SBA place, I tend to not have competitors. I actually just have colleagues that work at other places. So that if you're going to limit that borrower's progression or that customer's progression, where it can go to still help that person out the right way. That I think is building your brand. It's more of a brand of friendship, of collaboration, like you had mentioned. And as long as the rules of your employer don't negate your ability to do that, you have the ability to get these guys the right services, the way that they need it, and not something that's just forced down their throat by an automated brand that may look flashy, but doesn't really hit the need of the customer in the end.
Your idea of the dinosaur and the calloused mind. I love the visual. It's almost like a fossil. It's a fossilized
It really is.
mind. And it does. It conveys a very strong perspective. What can be done to break up the callous, to file that down? Because I am seeing that there are a lot of leaders, they're seeing that things are changing. They're thinking that things are changing. But damn it, they're not doing anything different. And as an entrepreneur who is built on a world of change, even like I'm not the same person I was yesterday. It's like every single day I wake up, it's like I feel like I have to, for lack of a better word, kill my old self, because it's dangerous to take yesterday's perspective into today. It's like James Clear. It's like I got to be 1% better today than I was yesterday. And if I'm 1%, that compounds over time. So at the end of the quarter, I have progressed. But for the calloused mind, what can be done to break down old beliefs that drive behavior?
I'd love to say it was facts, like actually boiling things down to true fact of what is and isn't. And the reason I say that is because in order to uproot something that has a strong, I guess, roots into the ground of what they've understood is always right. If you don't have the truth to tell them otherwise, that isn't embedded in not beyond reason, but actual factual evidence from data supported, you're not going to even get started. But the next problem is much more philosophical. Like you said, you're constantly studying philosophy, is understanding that you're talking to a human. Right? This isn't a rule-following robot or algorithm that's been written that you just give a data input and output something else. This is somebody who has conditioned themselves, or even if you're looking internally, if you're not able to look outside of the fact that, hey, I could be wrong. If you can't get somebody to that point, because that's what's has to happen, is anybody you're working with has to come to the consensus that maybe I'm not correct. The moment that light flips on, all of a sudden work can kind of be done. But there's barriers, there's let's call it emotional pride, things that I think really prevent people from even thinking that they need to question themselves. And it's something I've been a victim of. I do it to myself sometimes. Like I just get stuck in emotion, and it prevents me from being able to see logic, to see alternatives. And if I think that self-assessment is something that a minority of people in the world, that I've encountered very few that have been able to actually perform and excel at. So especially the higher up the food chain you get in a company, because you begin to use that as the badge that gives you the power, and say, why would anyone tell me that I've been doing something wrong? Look at the label I'm wearing. Like, I'm here for a reason. And it's actually the opposite of most of the what any of the good business books out there are telling you right now. If you're not talking to your employees and them telling you you're wrong, you're doing something wrong.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the conversation with Shane, but I wanted to invite you to text me right now, 832-549-5792. That is my cell phone. Text me, 832-549-5792 to become a member, to join me in the digital growth community so that you can unlock all 12 courses in our digital growth university. Plus, as a community member, you're going to get access to monthly mastermind roundtables that I facilitate so that you can continue to expand your network, to connect, to learn, to grow with other financial brand marketing and sales leaders. So text my cell phone right now to join, 832-549-5792, and to thank you for being a listener of the Digital Growth Podcast. I'm also going to benchmark your website so that you can see how your website performance compares to other financial brands. Text me, 832-549-5792. Join the community, get access to the university, benchmark your website. Now let's get back to the show with Shane. See, and I think there's a bit of a paradox here because I live in two worlds. I've lived in the banking world for 22 years, helping financial brands, community banks, credit unions uncover and eliminate blind spots in their customer journeys that literally are costing them millions in loans and deposits. And you can talk fact all day long. It's like, I know as of our Q3 2024 study, that 86% of institutions still have not mapped out customer journeys or members' journeys, still have not secret shopped their website. That's a fact. And that number really hasn't changed but a couple of percentage points since writing Banking on Digital Growth, published back in 2020. So we got a 4-year, almost a 5-year horizon line. And I'm really questioning and wondering, like, if nothing's going to change, what's going to change? And the only thing that can change is us as individuals. And so you're right. There's a belief mechanism that's protecting the system, the status quo. And I think that's one reason too that we're seeing such progression happening in the fintech space, whether that be on the retail side or the commercial side or the mortgage side, because those fintech leaders are playing a different game. They're not even playing the same game. They're playing a different game with a different set of beliefs. They're playing an entrepreneurial game. And when you look at the banking world and the entrepreneurial world, which is also my other side, I see there's more of a natural inclination for the entrepreneurial mind, even at the executive founder CEO level, to say, you know what? I don't know, or I'm wrong, or I need help. And I'm curious because, once again, I think with the SBA space, you're straddling that line as well. Banking, entrepreneurial perspective. Why might an entrepreneur have a more naturally inclined growth mindset than the inherent fixed mindset of a banker?
I think the banks are often pleasing more than themselves as far as like what the net result is of the work that they put in, right? Like they have shareholders have always been a big driver of control within a bank, and regulators. And so the regulation puts a significant handcuff on how you grow, how fast you grow, what you grow into. And so if we're talking banks in particular, that can really stop a lot of growth. And I think a lot of it's seeded in the people that are working at the bank. Like the regulators will review resumes. They see experience levels of people. And if you're trying to get into something that you don't understand, you're going to be told no when you want to make those moves. So, or you'll be harshly challenged by them when they come in for their audits. So I think that, combined with the shareholder perspective and what they really want out of the institution, if it's a privately owned bank and they have just like family that owns the institution, maybe they just don't want to shake anything up because they're collecting $10 million a year in net profit. And they don't. That's happy. It lets them live their lifestyle, fly their planes, live their dream. Or you have one that's owned by private equity or venture capital that has a different trajectory of where they want to go and how things need to be run. and at a high level looks great, but at a lower level it requires a lot more build out. I think that driving that pulls that direction with regulators pulling this direction keeps them out of full control over
Sure.
how to really drive the ship.
Yeah.
Two different wind forces, if you will.
No.
Where the entrepreneur themselves, I think, essentially have one person at the helm. They got one unified like strategy at scale, of course.
Sure.
That they really have their hand on the wheel. So.
And that makes a lot of sense because I think about the work of Gino Wickman, who wrote EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and he identified there are two key characters in a growth-driven entrepreneurial organization. You have a visionary who's always looking out, charting the course, seeing the future, bringing the future into the present, and then you have an integrator that helps the entrepreneur, the visionary, make that reality really real. So I appreciate the comparison and the contrast, but coming back to the point of regulators and the idea of knowledge, I've been hypothesizing, and just within the past month or so, started to speak about this on the podcast because it's a relatively new idea as I'm writing my third book. Thanks to large language models, knowledge is commoditized. So the idea of where we have been with a quote unquote knowledge economy, though that ship has sailed, to use your analogy of the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And so we move from agricultural economy to industrial economy through the knowledge economy. And the next level after that, I'm looking at, and specifically, I think how it's going to impact SBA and commercial lending and banking for that matter, just at a macro level, is the wisdom economy. And wisdom comes from experience. Now, we got to be very careful with that because this little pride, arrogance, and ego could come into play. But I think that there's the human experience too. And it's the ability, and you mentioned this before, the idea of emotion is the fastest way to kill a deal. To be able to connect with another human being, to unlock their experience, to capture their experience, to share their experience. It's going to be it's a skill that it can be benchmarked, it can be coached, it can be developed. Where might there be a gap within just the macro level, specifically on the SBA side, of making these connections, having these conversations to where it's not knowledge driven, but it's more wisdom, human experience driven?
Oh, let me pull right off what you said. So it's the wisdom intelligence. Is that the phrase you use? Wisdom,
or something that, as you and I before we hit recording, we were talking about like authentic intelligence.
Authentic intelligence,
not AI, not artificial, but authentic intelligence.
Yeah, because like intelligence can be mimicked, right? That's all that is really happening on the AI side.
Mm-hmm.
Emotions is something that even is being attempted to be mimicked, but where that sits and the ability to read that still has some years of development before any of this is going to really get copied. Anything how to that a bank does or that you know how to do, like going back to what you said, that has been commoditized, right? That information anyone can pull out. So the wisdom experience that you're talking about is really going to be seated on an ability for somebody to connect with the person that's on the other end of the phone, on the end of the screen, or right in person. And that takes a lot of touch, to the point where I say, take the people out of the line that you have working, connecting with that customer that don't have that experience, and put them back to shadow, right? To learn how to have a conversation, to learn how to not get heated when your customer gets heated. Like that's taken a lot of failure on my part. And I think that's the biggest part. I failed tremendously, especially early in my career, letting my emotions get to the same level of the person who's on the other end of the phone, whether from a passion perspective and them wanting to drive it. And so I'm going to match that, and I'm going to like portray and run everybody over to get there. Like that, you have to be the even keel. And anyone that knows me personally knows that that's something I don't actually do very well on a consistent basis. But when it comes to within this niche, I can like hyper focus into just doing SBA loans. I have become a hell of a lot better at that today than I was 2 days ago, 3 days ago. And it's taken me training myself from an outside perspective, not actually banking. I don't go to anyone in banking to learn how to be a better person, because that's what I think it is, to be an authentic person. No one in banking is going to teach me that. No one in marketing is going to teach me that. It's going to come from personal connections that I have and asking for feedback and looking. For me, it's a very spiritual thing. It's a part of my daily religion, if you will, that like I look for that on how to be a good person to everyone that I come in contact with. And when I fail at that, trying to change on a constant daily basis, that comes across very quickly in conversation with the people you talk to. They see your intent.
Yeah,
And that's you can only learn that from someone else who's already been doing it.
but you're unlocking something here that I think we can't gloss over. You're operating from a higher purpose. You're operating from a higher calling, but you also know that you're not bound by your past experiences. Your past experiences don't become an anchor. They become a
Catapult.
a training tool. They become seeds that you plant for future growth that will bear fruit. When you're talking about this idea of emotion and not getting heated, staying calm, you're digging into the EQ, so the emotional intelligence. You combine that with AQ, which is adaptability intelligence, something that I wrote about in Banking on Change, my second book. EQ plus AQ is greater than IQ, which is just intelligence. And it's back to the point of artificial intelligence. What we're looking for is authentic intelligence. How have you continuously adapted yourself over the last 18 years? You mentioned you have a spiritual component to this, but what else has driven the continuous transformation and evolution of just who Shane is?
And the brutal truth to it is my continual failure. I think saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, having a nickname of Fat Fingers occasionally with letting the emails fly, and like just the moments of passion overtaking me. And I've been given a what is it, a spirit animal of a rhino when I was as a kid, where I just freaking charge, and regardless of what the hell the collateral damage is, I'm going to get to where I want to go,
Right.
regardless of who that might damage or what that might damage. And then I always got to go back and clean it up. So that's happened enough now that maybe my eyes are a little bit wider, that I have been able to see differently. And so it's gotten me to the point of learning to pause in any of those emotions. And from different books I've been reading, Outward Mindset's a great one that just makes you learn how to pause and start to think about another person's perspective. I still miss it. I still fail. Call anyone I work with, and you say at least once Shane's done that. But I hope that you heard that as a quick follow up of an apology, and you learn that from marriage as well. That you got to diffuse. You got to diffuse and learn how to adjust the narrative in the room, right? And so that has helped me use like that little mantra of just pause, diffuse, correct it, be okay to be wrong. And that has helped me to think outside the box that I tend to let myself get trapped in occasionally. And I, with repetition, just like the failures you might have in sports and anything else, that's helped me to grow into being a much more successful, have a higher hit rate on anything that I do. Agility, ability to achieve performance metrics is a lot easier when I'm kind of in a good swell of consistently doing that with myself. So, which I feel like is where I'm at right now.
Right. And it's that ongoing review and reflection that creates the self-awareness to be even better. Once again, it's that idea of that 1% would be 1% better tomorrow than I am today, and letting go of the beliefs that could keep me tied to the past, because those beliefs are such a strong driver of behavior. And even when writing Banking on Change, I think one of the most fascinating things that I found was 95% of what we do, our behavior, our actions, our habits, run at a subconscious level. And if we're not aware of that, just the idea, then it's so easy to go through and just like what Napoleon Hill wrote about in Think and Grow Rich, and then also Outwitting the Devil. It's so easy just to drift through life. And then you die. And I think for me, one of my own personal philosophies is memento mori, and having these memento mori moments of reflection. And memento mori is Latin, remember you will die. And a lot of people, when I explain this to them, initially they're put off, like, oh, that's a morbid thought. I'm like, no, we need to reflect on death more, and our own death and our own mortality, because I don't think there's a better way to course correct than to think, you know what, we're going to die. We don't know when we're going to die, but am I living the way that I want to die? Because it's like William Wallace in Braveheart, one of the things he said, every man dies, but not every man truly lives. And I think remembering these mortality moments, it's a great way to course correct and get back to the path that we're really truly called from a higher perspective, whether that be a spiritual perspective, the future self, whatever you want to call that. But to get to that point and to get back on track and to keep making progress. And our past does not define who we are today, nor is our path or our past the path to the future. Shane, this has been a great conversation. For those watching or listening, what can you provide them with an action, something small that they can take to guide them forward on their path of continuous growth?
Implement, whether you're religious or not, you can call it prayer, you can call it meditation, but you've got to do a end of day look at yourself to see if you have actually grown, to see if you've done anything different today that has made you better, has made somebody else's life better, whatever it is. So take that time to really break yourself down every single day. And if you can't start there, do it once a week. If you go to church on Sunday, or if you go out with your family, whatever it is, you take the time to really look at what you need to be doing differently. So if the moment you said it earlier, the too much of life is seeking out comfort. And it's funny because humans can't idle forward. Comfort is this space that we think we all need to be in. And really, once you hit it, you start going backwards, because gravity has a really hefty effect on pulling you away from progress. So from a physiological, from a social, from a mental standpoint, is you have to be in some state of discomfort constantly in order to continue to grow. You need the resistance. So you can use your own mind to put yourself into that state. And it's not to be frustrated or constantly anxious, but be looking for solutions to make you greater. And I think that that kind of a change, that kind of an implementation of self-diagnosis, what did I do today? What am I feeling today? What do I need to do tomorrow? Will help you to find the next growth and see those opportunities that are really out there.
You're reminding me of the book, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. And the subtitle of the book is Embrace Discomfort to Reclaim Your Wild, Happy, Healthy Self. And to build upon your thought and your recommendation, your action for someone watching or listening to do the end of day reflection, it's a very stoic philosophy. We can go back and we can see Marcus Aurelius and his end of day reflections in his book Meditations. And at the time, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful person on planet Earth back then, he was dealing with the same struggles, the same trials, the same tribulations that we are today, 2,000 years later. And so as a simple framework, and I've taught my kids this, I teach teams this, I wrote about this in Banking on Change. End of day, it's a 4-minute exercise, 1 minute for each element to answer the question, what's been going well? WELL. W is where you've been winning. So what were your 3 big wins for the day? E is what are you excited and energized about right now in the present? L is what did you learn? So that could be an experience, that could be something you read or watched just to reflect on a learning. And then finally, what are you looking forward to tomorrow? And by just going through that 4-minute review of what's been going well, you will continuously make progress day after day, week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year as an individual. And when you bring this framework to your team, the value creation truly does exponentially multiply. Shane, I really appreciate you joining me for this conversation. If someone wants to continue the conversation that we've started here today, what's the best way for them to reach out and say hello to you?
You can send me an email, look me up on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'm happy to respond.
What's your email for those watching and listening wondering?
Yep. I'll give you my personal brand. It's Shane at ShanePierson.com.
Connect with Shane, learn with Shane, grow with Shane. Shane, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun today, buddy.
I appreciate you.
As always, and until next time, be well, do good, and be the light.